Hi, my name is Rick Schnabel, and tonight I'd like to share with you my $1 billion degree. Now, tonight the information is absolutely pertinent to those people who, of course, are neuro-linguistic programming trained, life coaches, trainers, anybody who wants to help people to actually shift their wealth. So what I'm going to do, without further ado, is I'm going to take you to some slides that I've created to make this a little bit entertaining for you. And I hope you enjoy my $1 billion degree. So let's begin. So firstly, there's always something stopping us when we want something more. Have you ever wondered what part of your education actually held you back? You know, let's face it, the moment we get any information into us, that is part of our education. And education is not just in schools, folks. Of course, it happens at home as well and everywhere else. So after all, someone somewhere must have taught us our limitations. So where do we store those particular limitations? And what do they look like? What do they sound like? And what do they cause us to do? And what if you could isolate that part and remove it? Imagine the possibilities. So for most of my life, I searched everywhere, anywhere imaginable for that part. And in 2000, I discovered the part that was holding me back. And it didn't come from a therapist. I discovered it by accident from business. It became my $1 billion degree. And it all started with an insight. But why do I call it that? Why do I call it my $1 billion degree? Well, because that's what it costs to discover the elusive part, that part. All this time I was training myself to be better when I really needed to be untraining myself to be better. You know, changing some of the neurological programs within me in order for me to become the better me. I'll give you the how at the very end, how you specifically do that, I promise. So this is me. My name is Rick Schnabel. I'm a brain untrainer. I'm also a trainer of NLP or neuro-linguistic programming, life coaching, heart-centered speaking, and trainers training. This is my company, Life Beyond Limits. We started it back in 2004, and we now have a couple of other companies as well. Coach Business College, which is a joint venture to actually teach coaches the business of coaching. You know, many coaches are really good at their skills of actually coaching, but often they're not so good at the sales, at the marketing, at the actual business. So Coach Business College is really about teaching coaches how to become successful coaches. Digital Wisdom is a partnership with a gentleman called Warren French, good friend of mine. Now, Warren, he's very passionate with technology, so he has created an environment where all our programs are all digitized, such as our audio programs, our ebooks, and also our change programs are all found at Digital Wisdom. And by the way, if you're a life coach or an NLP practitioner and you've got products as well, please feel free to contact Warren. He'd love to have you included on the site, no doubt. Now, Breakthrough. Breakthrough is a 2-day weekend, and this particular weekend is designed to help people to understand what NLP is actually all about. So it's all those people who have heard about it, have thought to learn it, but have never actually taken that step. So it's about teaching people the tools of NLP to create that breakthrough, that transformation. Of course, we're trainers of nationally accredited trainers of NLP practitioner, and we're also life coach trainers. We call that program Career and Life Mastery Level 1. Then there's Level 2, which is Masters. Then we also teach speaking with confidence, so people can get out there and be confident in getting up in front of an audience and leverage their businesses and leverage their lives, and of course share their passions with the world. That is part one of trainers training, and that of course is part two of trainers training. And those courses are accredited through the Australian Board of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So that is the body here in Australia to just make sure that we're all at a level and we're maintaining credibility of what we do and creating integrity of what we teach. I've also written a few books. Life Beyond Limits was my very first book, and I've written a few others. I, of course, have created many products, many of those that I was referring to earlier on digital wisdom. And I think to date, I've created around 60 different programs, and the large majority are all available on digital wisdom. Now, my billion-dollar education. It happened around the year 2000. Around the year 2000, I got this amazing idea. It just jumped into my head and I got the whole idea at once. And it was an idea based around various conversations that I'd had with many people about what the potential of the internet really had within it. And there were many companies who were getting online and creating all sorts of opportunities to change the way we do things. And the internet really did that. You know, there were many people wondering, you know, when was Amazon actually going to start making money? And there were some people wondering, you know, was Facebook, you know, just a pie in the sky idea? And, you know, of course, today with hindsight, we now know that these are massively viable businesses. And, you know, many businesses are starting to go online. But back in 2000, it was a very different world. And what I discovered is I discovered that the biggest costs, essentially, in delivering education was the fact that universities, particularly in the tertiary realm, universities had to invest in a lot of capital, you know, bricks and mortar buildings to teach people within, you know, and all the systems and structures around that. Equally, they had to have incredible resources, such as people resources. Now, the idea that I got was I thought, what if you put this online? You wouldn't have to have, you know, as much building. You wouldn't have to have as many resources. And so this created an incredible opportunity. And, you know, I could not sleep when I got this idea. I was just moving boxes around, you know, shuffling matrices, looking at business models. And I was so excited about this idea. But the fascinating thing, the following morning, I was to meet with a guy called John. Now, John happened to own a college. Perhaps even having that meeting sat with my unconscious and delivered this idea to me. And I was to meet with him at the Grand Prix, but I called him just beforehand and I asked him whether he would be okay to catch up for a coffee at the Sheraton. Now, we were meant to be at the Grand Prix at about 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning. It was about noon before we left the Sheraton because I showed John my idea. John was weak at the knees. He looked at this idea and he said, this is absolutely perfect for a vision that we have with our college. So we ended up going to the Grand Prix, but in all honesty, we stayed there for a very short amount of time because it was very noisy, even in the box, you know. And what happened was we decided to go somewhere else to sit down in a quiet spot so we could begin to create. You see, Einstein once said that imagination is more important than knowledge. And so what we did is we utilized our imagination with this idea and we built a company within days. It was called Intellect 21. Intellect 21 was going to house essentially all the intellectual property and this business which was going to become a company that delivered online education. You know, we recognized that we could deliver degrees and diplomas much cheaper than any university in the world could provide. And yet they were a high standard Australian degree and diploma, which was highly regarded in many countries. So what we did is we started to build this idea. And of course, we had to flesh it out. We had to work out what was the scope of this idea, what was the potential financially of this idea. And we came up with a figure. The EBIT was $42 million using the resources of 7,500 students. So what we had was essentially, we had a very big number in front of us, and that became a problem. You see, John nor I, at this particular point, had ever earned anything like this amount. And 42 million in your first year of business as your earnings before interest and tax, your EBIT, is a very big figure. Now, John asked me to look at the calculation numerous times. We sat there at his home, in his lounge room, on the carpet, tapping away at a calculator, trying to work out whether this number was real. Now, of course, it's a projection, but it was a projection based on a very small percentage of the student population worldwide. Now, that number we had a problem with, and the concept that I'm going to introduce you to is essentially a comfort zone. But I'm going to talk a little bit more later about a cybernetic system. And this cybernetic system governs what you and I earn. So what happened was, John suggested that we fly off that Friday to Jakarta. He was due to be there on business, and he wanted me to come along to meet with various universities in Jakarta. We met with the Vice Chancellor and a few other gentlemen from University Terbuka. And the Vice Chancellor looked at our business model, looked at our numbers, and immediately said he wanted to own half of this business. He wanted 50%. And I then said to him, 50% is a major slice of the pie. What are you bringing to the table in order to demand 50%? And he said, very interesting question, Mr. Schnabel. And no one could get my surname correct over in Indonesia. But the thing was that he said that your figure of 7,500 students is a fascinating figure. It's a fascinating figure for this reason. Our distant education students, the number is 75,000 students. So you can imagine our abacus went wild. You know, all of a sudden, we realized that the number that we had put forward as a projection looked much bigger. So our 42 million changed to become 75,000 students and 998 million. Now, I know you might be saying, well, he did say it was $1 billion education and he's $2 million shy of that. That is true. I have rounded it up to $1 billion. But let's remember, we're talking about projections here. The problem with this number was too big. We had a difficulty with this number. You know, 42 million was hard enough to reconcile within our thinking, but 998 million, almost $1 billion, was inconceivable. Now, the fascinating thing is I've discovered something very potent in the context of transforming people and coaching people and taking people beyond their limits. And the thing that I've discovered is that essentially people will do remarkable things when the thrill is far greater than the spill. But if the spill is far greater than the thrill, then people won't do anything. And so, although 998 million, it certainly was a big thrill, it wasn't real yet. You know, we did not have that money in our hands, in our bank accounts, or anywhere close. The business was only an idea at this stage. So what happened is, when the spill appears bigger than the thrill, we find intellectual reasons to stop ourselves. And, you know, John and I started finding reasons that it wouldn't work rather than reasons that it would work. And this is all in the realm of psychology. You see, intellectual people, even dumb people, create logical reasons for not doing things. And we started finding lots of reasons to not do things. You know, let me give you an example of how smart things might sound. You know, at the time, we had people from all over the world coming to visit us. In fact, we had one group of people from one particular country who said in such a poetic way, and that I wish I'd recorded it, that should the business go south for whatever reason, that they should invest in us and the business go under, that they would murder our family and our family's family, and they would get rid of our entire surnames. Now, it was said quite eloquently, far better than I've just expressed it there, but it all of a sudden set some fear within John. It set an enormous amount of fear with John. You know, I can remember in the meeting afterwards saying to John, look, we do not have to do business with these people. In fact, I wouldn't do business with these people, you know, not based on some of their threats, you know, and they weren't even business partners yet. You know, but John was scared. You know, equally on the same token, you know, John was heading towards retirement and his wife was not so well. And his dream was to take his wife off to Provence in France and live a wonderful life. And I cannot blame John whatsoever for walking away from the business. You know, he had good reason to, perhaps. He had another good reason, and the other good reason was, you know, our investors at one particular point decided that the online business wasn't enough because some of the dot-coms, you know, started failing, or there was rumors of failures, but that was enough. So we had to get the business, the offline business, valued and the online business valued. Now, the online business wasn't valued all that highly because it was just an idea, but the offline business came in at $5.6 million. Now, that was music to John's ears because he never realized that his business was worth that. And so all he could think about was selling his business and then taking his wife off to Provence and living a wonderful retirement. That's what John did. And as a result of that, an idea, which was Intellect 21, evaporated. Just as quickly as it was created, it disappeared. There was no more business anymore because there was no more content. You know, and we'd have to start again with other campuses, you know, other universities, and many didn't even believe it was possible. Of course, today, you know, there are many universities that are online, so it's certainly more than possible. So what do you think was the part that was responsible for the demise of the business? Well, Norbert Wiener coined the phrase cybernetics. He defined it as the science of control and communication in the animal and the machine. The control and communication in the animal and the machine, cybernetics. And he coined that phrase. But a cybernetic system is basically our relationship to things. See, we adjust our behavior just like a thermostat will adjust itself up and down based on our relationship to money. You know, for example, looking at this $1 coin right now, it doesn't mean much to anyone who earns thousands of those or hundreds of thousands of those, but it means a lot to someone, you know, where that one coin can be the difference between eating and not eating. See, we all have a relationship to money. And the cybernetic system, to put it into a model, might look something like this. You know, what we have is we have a threshold. We have a threshold, and when we get beyond that threshold, we move into the pain. So there is a threshold at the top end, and there's a threshold at the bottom. You know, for example, If you're earning $100,000 a year and all of a sudden you lose your job and you can only get a job at $50,000 a year, there would be an enormous amount of pain. You know, there'd be a lot of adjustment. Equally so, as crazy as this may sound, if someone offered you $1 million a year, that would equally cause some pain. It would cause pain because typically we would start looking at that quite cynically and skeptically. We would start to believe that it's not possible. You know, what body part am I having to donate to get that money? Or what am I having to do? Equally, we'll have a complex equivalence around that, or we'll have an ordinal, you know, that, oh my God, I'm working so hard in order to earn 100,000 to earn $1 million. Imagine everything I'm going to have to do. You know, so many of our programs come into play when it comes to money. In fact, there is no other device on planet Earth that creates as much mental turmoil than money. So let's bring it into the realm of working with clients. If you are working with a client who wants to expand their comfort zone, you know, create more income, you have to be able to expand their comfort zone. You have to be able to stretch their comfort zone out so that the boundaries of their thinking expand. So they've got a greater amount of ability to deal with pain. Now, you notice that pain actually is within that comfort zone now. And one thing that I've discovered over the years is in order to create more income, you must make peace with pain. You must be able to deal with pain. Now, pain can equally be as simple and as minor as change. There are many people who believe that change is pain. And when you can get to a point that you can get comfortable with pain, then you can equally get comfortable with increasing your income. So what is your cybernetic system set to? The answer to this question is really simple. It's as simple as this. Whatever you're earning now tells you what your cybernetic system is. If you're earning $50,000 a year, you have set your cybernetic system to $50,000 a year. If you're earning $100,000 a year, you have set your cybernetic system to $100,000 a year. In fact, you've done more than that. You've probably set up your outgoings. You've set up the amount of money you spend, of course. You've set up mortgages. You've set up loans. You've set up a whole bunch of things and behaviors all around your income. And it's all predicated by your cybernetic system. So it's very, very simple to know what your cybernetic system is set to. It's based on what you're earning now. Now, while Descartes, who was a philosopher and a mathematician, he proposed, I think, therefore I am. That is, I think, therefore I exist. Now, when we look at Norbert Wiener, believed that cybernetics generated what he called a circular causal. Now, a circular causal, you will hear this frame in many different other frames, such as perception is projection, what you think you are, what you think you become. So a circular causal just simply means that, you know, whatever is the element of cause, it creates that, it draws that same cause to itself, like attracts like, for example. So our beliefs become us. So when we talk about, you know, like Rene Descartes proposed, I think, therefore I am, or I think, therefore I exist, Norbert Wiener believed that I believe, therefore I am. So, in other words, how you see yourself is everything. How you believe you are is everything. Let me give you an example of this, and let me show you how profound this actually is. Quite a number of years, Dove created a campaign, and what they did in this campaign is they got a sketch artist to actually have a look at how a person perceives themselves and how others perceive them. So the way that they did this is they got an individual, in this case, Lani, to describe herself by looking in a mirror, describe herself to the sketch artist, who would then sketch the picture. And she would adjust the picture by asking them to, take things away or put more emphasis in other parts. Then there was another person, a stranger, who watched and looked at Lani and did the same thing to the sketch artist, but Lani seemed to look quite different based on their perceptions. If you look at the hair, how different that is, the thickness of the eyebrows, the fullness of the lips, the size of the mouth, quite different by description. Let's have a look at this one. This is Janice. On the left is Janice as described by Janice. On the right is Janice as described by a random stranger. Now, one thing that you begin to see here is the actual weight on the face is quite different, quite markedly different between the left and the right. Now, of course, we don't have the original photos here, so we don't know which one is more accurate. But the truth is that one person sees the person thinner than the other person sees them. Here is Keela. So Keela looks quite different by a random stranger. So what we're getting a sense of is that we have a certain idea of who we are and other people have another idea of who we are, but who we think we are is how we act. So here, in my view, is the most extreme of all. This is Florence. Now, if you look at Florence very carefully on the left, that's how she sees herself. This is how other people see her. It's almost completely different. Hair color looks completely different. The actual thinness of the face looks different. In fact, if you were to approach one of these ladies, I would suggest that you would probably approach the one on the right more easily than you would approach the one on the left. Now, I would say that Florence probably sees herself as a little bit harder than the stranger sees Florence. Now, what we're beginning to get a sense of is what is the attitude that sits beneath the face, and that is the neurology that determines who we are. So the truth is that we are all as individual as our thumbprint. We are unique. Now, I equally thought that I was a certain way. Now, back when I was 26 years old, this is a photo of me on a motorcycle trip at 26 years old. Now, I had a lot of bad stuff going on. I had a really bad attitude. And that attitude was largely formed from my memories, my memories in the past, who I thought I was, who I thought I wasn't, all the things that happened to me, the things that I did, all began to form my mental blueprint. Equally, my values, the things that I valued and the things that I didn't value, determined my very attitude, who I became. Many of these programs were very impoverished. I had impoverished memories. My values of wealth were really low. My values of myself were really low. My beliefs, my very beliefs that determined who I thought I was, beliefs is kind of like your on-off button. It's kind of like what you will do, what you won't do, while your values are in a hierarchy, and your memories are on a timeline. Some things are closer to now, other things were a long, long time ago. Time heals all wounds. All of these elements predicate that blueprint, that thumbprint that make us, us. And they say that your past is not your future. Yet most people believe that's untrue. Most people determine their future based on their past, on all these things. And that's why neuro-linguistic programming, of course, is so wonderful in helping people to change all these patterns and all these blueprints to help us to become the people that we'd really like to see ourselves as. So I really thought about this. I began to think about this, and I wondered, surely you can change your financial future if you can begin to change your memories, re-imprint your memories. Change your values in a hierarchy. Bring certain values higher up the hierarchy, and others move them further down. Perhaps change some beliefs. Have some on buttons that used to be off buttons, and off buttons that used to be on buttons. So here I was at the end of my first level of NLP. When I first learned level 1 NLP, this is what happened for me. Now, you'll have your own story, no doubt, but this was mine. I believed there was a glass ceiling, an income glass ceiling, that you could only get up so high. Even though I could see the trappings of wealth, I just couldn't experience it myself. And all the banging against that glass just really didn't make any difference. But after learning NLP, I went from the bottom of the organization I was working for at the time to the top. I was in sales. I was at the bottom of the rung in Australia and America. I was the worst of the worst. In 3 months, I went to the top. In fact, I went so high to the top with my results that I remember a friend of mine remarked, he said, "You are earning more than John Howard." Now, John Howard at the time was our Prime Minister. Now, the thing that I really got from this was it was remarkable. I was so excited, but the company was equally excited, but they were a little bit suspicious. So they flew over to Melbourne to meet with me. And that's how suspicious they were. They thought, how can someone go from the bottom to the top in 3 months? It's impossible. He must be doing something criminal. So they flew down to meet with me. And of course, after a period of time, they discovered that everything I was doing was above board. And in fact, I had learned some great skills, and my attitude certainly had changed. And I showed, told them all about my beliefs and, that I had changed and some of the programs I had changed. And of course, their beliefs didn't really meet with that. So what I had to tell them in the finish is, yes, I met with more people. I met with more clients. Of course, I did that. And then that, of course, met with their beliefs. But the thing was that I began to realize that we can really shift our earning capacity when we start shifting our thinking. That it is true, that it's not a myth, that people say, just change your attitude and you change your life. Well, of course, how do you do that? Well, we all know with NLP that that's how you do that. So since then, I've worked with hundreds of people to adjust their cybernetics system to improve their wealth. And here's how I do it. First of all, I look in 3 different areas. Now, in the context of wealth, it's really about appropriate chunking. That is, you don't want to take a massive leap and try to change everything. You need to isolate where the problems actually are. So one area is income, of course. The second area is outcome. That is all the outgoings, all the expenditure. And the third area is investing. So there are many people that I've worked with in the past that their biggest problem at first is level 1, income. They're just not earning enough income. So sometimes they actually do have a ceiling. It's called a job, as they often say, JOB, just over broke. And, their job is limited. They can't earn 6 figures because, they're in a job that you just do not naturally earn 6 figures. So they can't increase their income to start moving to the next level. And that is, having more money than bills. So many people are robbing Peter to pay Paul, struggling and so forth. So what we're often got to do there, and you as a coach, if you're working in this area, what you want to be looking at is their income potential higher? You know, can they earn more in their current job? If they can't, you've got to start getting creative and thinking of things that they could actually do, perhaps other vehicles that they could use to increase their income. Now, another way that you can help more money to come into someone's life is level 2. One common problem that I often see these days is people, even though they might be on high level incomes, they are spending as much, if not more, you know, by living very lavish lives. And for example, I can remember one particular gentleman that I worked with, and he wanted to increase his wealth. And once we did an assessment of his assets, once he liquidated totally, I think from memory, it was something along the lines of $6.8 million would have been, you know, the amount of money that he would have been able to liquefy. And but the problem was his lifestyle was so lavish that you know, his income just was way below his outcome. So the third area is when you earn the right to invest. And that happens because your income is greater than your outcome and you've got some left over, so you can now invest. So the 3 phases to wealth need to be looked at individually. You might have to lift someone's income, help someone to reduce their outcome or their outgoings, and build courage enough to invest. So they're the 3 phases essentially. So I'm going to introduce this idea that the key here is IOI, not IOU. You know, too many people these days are, you know, cranking up their credit cards and constantly IOUing all over themselves. So what we want to do is we want to IOI. So you'll hear this phrase a few times. You know, if you hear me say that, you know that I'm talking about income, outcome, and investing. So to effectively IOI your clients so that they can take the steps to wealth, what you need to do is you've got to determine their vehicle, the steps, and most importantly, why they're not taking those steps or why they must take those steps. So when I talk about vehicle, what I'm really talking about there is what is their income vehicle? You know, what creates the opportunity for creation of wealth? And the most important thing there is that, as I said earlier, if their job is not a good vehicle, then you've got to start thinking of other vehicles or other ways that they can really start earning money. Equally, the game here is that what we want to do is our aim is to work out what steps that someone needs to take in order to create wealth. Now, you do that along with your client, determining, okay, so what do you actually have to do to increase it? You know, and if they're not taking those steps, then clearly there are beliefs or their values or their memories or there's meta programs or something that's really getting in their way. Equally, on the same token, you want to increase their why. You know, work with them to build a reason that's compelling enough to actually do the work. Let's face it, anything that's worth doing, you know, and worth achieving typically is going to have some work involved. So you want to be able to build up a client's why. So I often use a thing that I call my success matrix, and I use this in coaching. In fact, I use it everywhere. So the very first thing that we're doing is we're really looking for attitude, and that's often where I will start. Now, words come out really quickly. Sometimes we don't know what those words really mean. So that's some of the text below the word attitude. The things that form an attitude are people's beliefs, their values, their meta programs, and also actually their patterns. So that determines a person's attitude. So what we want to work out with our clients is what is the ideal attitude. Your attitude is largely what you will do and how energetic you will do it. If a person says they'll do something, but yeah, I'll give it a go and see what happens, you know that that attitude isn't really going to get them success. So you need to work with your clients to determine what is the right attitude, and then you're going to have to most likely shift some beliefs, some values, and meta programs. Now, remember, my job here is not to teach you how to coach, because chances are you know how to do that. My job here is not to teach you to be an NLP practitioner. You probably know how to do that. And if you know how to do that, you know how to shift a person's attitude. The second thing is action. This is about really determining what you do and what you don't do in order to create wealth. You need to define what are the specific actions. For example, I've worked over the years with a lot of people in MLMs, multi-level marketing companies or network marketing. One of the most critical actions in network marketing is typically the ability to present, the ability to get out and present and sell. Now, if a person won't do that action, then what we need to do is work out why they won't do it. What do we have to shift or change in their neurology so they will do it? Because the truth is, if they won't do it, they most likely will not get the success that they really envision for themselves. A lot of people might say, oh no, all I have to get is a couple of really great leaders and I won't have to do a thing. Sorry, but I don't often see that happen in network marketing, regardless of all the promises that they make. So, action is really important. A lot of people think they need skills here, but I disagree. I think skills happen later. I believe that when you keep taking action, you're going to work out what skills you don't have and what skills you need. Equally, you're going to start building your skills, because repetition is really mastery. Now, in fact, there's a really good book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers. And Outliers, in that, Malcolm Gladwell talks about, the 10,000 hours to mastery. And I really agree with that idea. Now I'm almost at 10,000 hours in my NLP training. And I find that, when I hit around the 9,000 hours mark, I found that I hit a whole new level of mastery in my training. I find it really easy to explain things, really easy to teach, really easy to get, critical points across. So all my students really learn quite simply and easily. And that happens through mastery, through repetition, through constantly building skill. If you're a musician, for example, there's no way on earth you're going to really get to great levels of success without taking lots of action, lots of repetition to build the skill of playing the instrument that you play, be it your voice or a electronic instrument or whatever it might be. So the next thing is skill, working with your clients to determine what skills they need to focus on. By the way, I see this happen in businesses a lot. And that is that, people believe they have to learn every single skill. Untrue. Some people will get into a business and all of a sudden realize, oh, I need more people that come to my website. I've got to learn how to SEO my website. Well, you're better off paying someone to do that. Because unless you're in the game regularly, the game changes so quickly these days that you're better off having an expert that's really good at that. Focus your skills in other areas where you can earn the money so you can pay other people to do those things. I hope that makes sense. So the final thing is to be able to really create wealth. What you need to be able to do is systemize what you do. Be able to put things into a system so that you can constantly replicate this. Now, if you're going to grow your business to a point where there are other people going to take some of the tasks that you used to do, the more you systemize it, the easier it is to teach those parts or those functions. So in order to really gain success, you need to have the right attitude, determine what are the key actions to take those, in order to build your skill around those key actions, and then systemize it so you can keep testing and measuring it and keep tweaking it. So that's a bit of a model that you can use, when you're wealth coaching. And the truth is that 80% of your success, it will be spent in the attitude area. Getting that part right will almost predicate all the rest. So if you can so do the attitude, you can so do the actions, the skills, and work through systems to gain success. Now, I can remember once upon a time, Woody Allen said that 80% of success is just simply showing up. Well, I would argue that if you really want success, show up, and the 20% will be a great attitude. So, and in fact, 80% of showing up requires an attitude. So once you have determined a client's next action, whatever that might be, determine what beliefs, what values, what patterns, or what meta programs need to change. So, typically as you're taking a client through this, the moment that they stall on an action, like you might say, okay, the next action, the next thing that you really need to do is it's time to find, a financial planner or an investment advisor, someone who can really help you to invest that extra money you have. And then they can't do that, and they still want wealth. Well, then you've got to work out what belief or what value or what pattern or meta program or, what needs to change in order for them to be able to take that next action. Now, remember, in a coaching focus, what you're always thinking about is what is the next action and can they take that action? If they can't take that action, then you've got to do something to help them to shift whatever program is stopping them from taking that action. So once you've worked all that out, then it's a case of just doing the IOI work. Do all the change work that, helps your clients to shift and change. Do the neurological work so that they find it easy to get up off that chair and just fly forward and move with passion and with volition, so that they're powerful, unstoppable. So that's going to be the work that you know what to do. If you're NLP trained, it's a great set of skills, and you can do the change work. You can help your clients to create wealth. But let's face it, it's complex. It is complex. I've often had many clients who have come to see me in the first instance, and they've said, look, I've just got this one belief that I think if you help me change that belief, I'll be able to create wealth. And often, you'll say, well, it may help, but the chances are there's a whole cluster of other beliefs in there, and there's a whole bunch of values that need to change, and there's some patterns that probably need a bit of perfecting and fixing and shifting. So the truth is that wealth is a very complex game. So, let's go from this to this. So let's create some simplicity around this. As I say, my job isn't to, show you how to coach. My job here is really to give you some models to really help your clients to become wealthier. So here are some tips, some keys to really get this working for you. So the first tip is chunk. So that means don't bite too much off in one gulp. What you want to be able to do is focus only in one area. So focus on income, or focus on outgoings, or focus on the investment steps, but not all three at once. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to, whenever you're working with a client, just chunk in very small chunks, and that way you'll create long-lasting change and shift. But if you leapfrog and jump over steps too much, you'll find that you miss those critical keys to really get a client to totally get the goal that they're really wanting. So chunking is really important. The next thing that's really important is to calibrate their cybernetics system. And the job is to keep raising their income comfort zone. So calibrating their cybernetic system is as simple as just simply creating a numeric type calibration, such as you could choose a goal, and I often like doing this. A client will come and you'll say, okay, right, where do you want to be, financially? And they might say that, they're at $50,000 a year and they want to get to 100,000, for example. And so what you're calibrating on is that 100,000. So you might use that 100,000 in every single session to keep calibrating them to see where they're at. And you might then say, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 is you can totally create 100 grand a year. 0, you can't. What's the first number that springs to mind? You don't want them, of course, to think about this. You want more of an unconscious answer. So, click your fingers, distract them, do whatever you can to, create that urgency to get them to, get it out without thinking. So, if they say 8, then you get a sense that they could probably create, they believe that they could create $80,000, a year. And then when you get them to 10, then they believe that they can create 100,000. But remember, just because a client says 8 doesn't mean that they can create $80,000. It just means that they believe they can. They might need to have a better vehicle, or they might need to increase their skill, or continue their actions, or systemize their behavior in order to really reach that. So, don't think that just one coaching session is going to make all the difference. When I work with people in the context of wealth, I do no less than 5 sessions, and ideally I really want them to have 10 sessions with me. So what you want to do is calibrate the system. Now, here is an interesting one. Many years ago, when I was adjusting my cybernetics system, I had one of my coaches who was kinesiology trained, and she would put notes, actual money, on my chest, and then muscle test me, to see how my acceptance was of money. Very fascinating, by the way. What I found is that, I would show weakness at certain levels, and then what would happen is then she'd do some work with me, and then she'd retest me, and I'd be strengthened, and I'd be fine. And at the very beginning, what she did was she just put denominations, one denomination after another, just to see whether I had any resistance to any particular denominations. I think, in all honesty, I think it was great work, very clever work. Now, a third point is, wherever there is resistance to an action step, start with their beliefs of what is possible. Of course, as you grow your plethora of tools that you can use as a coach, that you'll have more and more options as to what tools to use. One thing that I've found in the past seems to work really well is, whenever I'm working with a client, if there is any resistance to a particular step, is something that they need to do and they know they need to do in order to grow their wealth, if they don't take that action, or they don't want to take that action, I would start with beliefs and help them identify what is the belief that's stopping them from taking that, and then change that belief. And that makes all the other processes often quite easy. So, by the way, this is my plug for my book. If you want to learn more about beliefs, this was a book that I wrote called The Power of Beliefs, because I had never found a book that, in my view, was kind of like the comprehensive book on beliefs. So I decided to write one. And I decided to write more than that. I discovered through my coaching that essentially there were 7 beliefs that really stopped my clients. So I poured through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of files to research this book, and I found 7 beliefs that really stop people. So that's my book. It's available at most bookshops, and only in Australia and New Zealand currently. And I think the UK as well. And either way, you can also be picked up from my website, which is lifebeyondlimits.com.au. So that's my plug. Thank you. So the next thing is that you want to add a measure. You want to add a measure to your coaching, such as their net worth, or their income, or their bank balance. So this will be a measure that you use every time you coach them, at the beginning and end. You do a calibration on their net worth or income or bank balance. Now, this can be very pragmatic as well. What we do is we will get our clients to complete a spreadsheet. Now, that spreadsheet is essentially, an assets and liabilities, and it gives us a figure of net worth. And we use that figure of net worth to, see how our clients are progressing. And it's a fantastic indicator because, what the actual formulas do is it pads it out over 10 years. So a person can actually project, based on CPI and a bunch of other things, what their net worth will be in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, right up to 10 years. The other thing you can calibrate on there is their income. That's an easy one. What are you earning currently each year? The other is bank balance, because that sometimes is an indicator of what's going in and what's coming out. So the final thing that I'd like to share with you here on the tips is, now this looks like calibrate, but it's not. The word is collaborate. And what you can also do is collaborate with other specialists. Because you're a life coach, it doesn't mean that you have to be an expert at all things. You have to be good at asking questions. And if you're an NLP practitioner, you're good at going through and helping people to shift their programs and so forth. But it doesn't mean you're an expert, in other areas. So what we do is, for example, if we've got a client that wants to increase their wealth through stock trading, we have partners who are brilliant at stock trading. So people like Louise Bedford, for example, and she's certainly an expert in stock trading. And so we would then refer our clients to her so they could go into a mentor program or something along those lines to help them to learn how to improve their trading. We have partners who are excellent financial planners. Equally, we have people who want to grow their companies, and they will often require investors. Marketing gurus, if they want to grow their business and they want to improve their social media or improve their positioning or their products or their price points, you need experts sometimes to take your clients even further than you can take them. You're working on their belief systems, that you're working on their programs, but sometimes you want other people to help as well. That way you can create extraordinary shifts with your clients. So, and equally, here's a good thing too. Often our partners will refer people to us and we'll refer people to them. So you have more people who are out there, selling you, which is fantastic, rather than you selling you. Now, to wrap this up, really, the whole reason that I'm sharing this with you is, if you're a life coach or an NLP practitioner, you actually owe it to yourself to improve your income. As you grow your income, you can create lots of opportunities to reinvest in your business, to take your business to the next level. Here is a little gentleman, in the middle as a presenter. And so what he's essentially doing is he or she has created that opportunity to get in front of more people. Getting in front of more people sometimes can cost more money, getting rooms and, materials and equipment and so forth. So as you grow your wealth, you create the opportunity to be able to do more and help more people. And that's the point of this. So think about this in this particular example. You're a life coach or an NLP practitioner or someone who really is most likely doing some real good out there in the community. I think coaching, for example, is a very noble career. I think there is a huge amount of people that we help by doing what we do. So in that context, I think the more coaches that are out there helping more people, because you're able to leverage yourself, then you're creating greater opportunities to connect to more, educate more, and of course, help more, which is a good thing. Or not, completely up to you. I hope that through this, I've given you some really good information, some helpful tips, some great insights into wealth and how to coach people, to improve their financial circumstances, but equally, you don't have to take any of this on board whatsoever. You have, the full right to choose what you want to create and what you don't want to create. So my name is Rick Schnabel. I'm a brain untrainer, a trainer of neuro-linguistic programming, life coaching, heart-centered speaking, and trainers training. And if you need to reach me or would like to reach me, the best ways to do that is via our website, which is lifebeyondlimits.com.au. You can equally phone us on the number that you see there on the screen. It's in Australia, of course. And you can equally reach me via email, via rick.schnabel@lifebeyondlimits.com.au. So I'd like to say a huge thank you for investing in the time to listen to this presentation so you could get some insights into helping you and helping others. So please, on behalf of myself and Life Beyond Limits, I'd like to say a huge thank you for investing all of the time to listen today. So thank you, and thank you.